Welcome into the show. This is Philadelphia 76ers Now. I'm Chase Sr. Appreciate all of you for being here with us. Coming up on the show today, Ramona Shelburne of ESPN dropping kind of a bombshell article on James Harden. So we're going to go through that article because there's certainly a lot to unpack within it. And what that story really covers is James Harden's delusion with his role and the player that he is right now. He did not travel with the team to Miami earlier in the 2022-2023 campaign, and he ended up beefing with Glenn Rivers a couple of times. And if James Harden were to come back to Philadelphia and actually play, and Glenn Rivers was the head coach, that was not going to work. It seems as though they did not get along. And also, James Harden once again in his feelings. We're going to unpack all of this here to my right. First, though, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Last night, late night, Philadelphia brought back Danny Green. According to Adrian Wojnarowski, he gets along well with Nick Nurse. He played for him. He gets along with Joel Embiid. My thoughts on that move was that Philadelphia badly needs some good vibes, and they need a veteran leader in that locker room with some of the drama that's happened. And in bringing in Danny Green, they're going to be able to kind of iron out some of the awkwardness that is lingering within this organization. But Woj also said that Danny Green doesn't have an opportunity to make this roster. So hit that subscribe button for year-round updates on Philadelphia here. We're a little more than 200 people away from 12,000 subscribers. How quickly can we get there? It's up to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Sixers fans to determine that. So let's start off here with this James Harden story, with him realizing the opportunity that he had with Philadelphia last year to win an NBA championship. And he said it himself. He said, this team is definitely the best chance I've had to win a title. It's still not perfect. It's still constant communication. The faster we can get going and catch a rhythm, we got a really good chance. Obviously, I'm capable of scoring more, and he said that making eye contact with Ramona Shelburne to emphasize the point, but I'm playing the right way, just doing whatever's necessary to win. That's what it's all about. Now, James Harden said that back in January, and I think that he was right in saying that. Philadelphia at the time had a chance to win an NBA championship. James Harden seemed cool with that at that moment, where he had to make some offensive sacrifices compared to his previous stops with maybe Brooklyn, definitely with the Houston Rockets, because he's playing alongside Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris, and in order for Philadelphia to play their best basketball, he had to take a backseat offensively and be more of the primary distributor. And in saying that in January, Philadelphia was playing good ball at the time, and in the NBA playoffs, they made it to the second round. They're one game away from making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and in that series, I thought they would have matched up well with the Miami Heat, with an opportunity potentially to make it to the NBA Finals. For the first time since 2001, we know how that ended, and James Harden crashing and burning was certainly a part of that. But James Harden, while he was cool with that in January, it was one of those things where he's cool with it until he wasn't. And I also said I thought Philadelphia operated best when Harden was the primary distributor and the third option. That only lasted so long. Now, with the James Harden contract, we know that he took that $14 million pay cut, and here's what he had to say about that. You have to sacrifice to get to where you've never been. I'm in a really good space on the court as well as off the court. So here's really the issue that I have with Harden understanding that he has to take a secondary or third role with the offense, and then him understanding you have to sacrifice to get to where you've never been. Harden realized it at the time, but then as the season progressed, as we got into the playoffs, James Harden wanted to be the number one offensive option. And he grew tired of Glenn Rivers because he didn't look at him as the number one option. He also said you have to sacrifice to get to where you've never been. So we made those sacrifices, and then at the end of the day, by the end of the season, he's like, you know what? Screw that. I'm not going to make those sacrifices any longer. I want to be the number one offensive option. And when he was the top option for Philadelphia's offense, I thought that's when they played poor offensive basketball. That's when the ball died, where he went dribble ISO heavy. And I just don't think that that is conducive to winning in the playoffs. To just dribble out the entire shot clock, if you can't create for yourself, which he struggled to do because he's not the same athlete, let me just chuck it to somebody else who's just waiting idly along that three-point perimeter, and they have to chuck up a low percentage shot. More from Shelburne here. She said the first hint that Harden's sacrifice, taking the pay cut, wasn't being appreciated, much less rewarded in the way that he hoped, came in late January when he was not voted to an All-Star game. Harden, who had made 10 consecutive All-Star games, was dismayed at the snub. But James Harden got in his feelings, and he had an opportunity to become an All-Star. It's his fault, actually, that he wasn't partaking in this All-Star festivities, because Shelburne said this: still, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver was prepared to name him as an injury replacement, sources said. Harden just had to give assurances that he would show up and play in the game. But what happened? James Harden in his feels. Days went by without Harden's answer. He was pouting. By the time that Harden sent word that he would accept the invitation, Adam Silver had already moved on, naming Toronto Raptors forward Pascal Siakam as the replacement for an injured Durant. That's James Harden's fault. It's one of those things where you're involved in a group project at school. You don't do any of the work. You don't help out at all. You're not in communication with your classmates. You flunk, and then you get angry by it. That's kind of the similarity that comes to mind when I think of this. More from Shelburne. In mid-December, Glenn Rivers lit into Harden for taking the final 3 shots in regulation of a double overtime loss to the young and lottery-bound Rockets. It wasn't that Rivers didn't trust Harden to take the final 3 shots. He had allowed him to run the offense and call his own number on the final play of regulation by not calling a timeout following a defensive rebound. It's that the Rockets had no answer for Joel Embiid, who dropped 39 points that night. And all night, Harden wasn't shooting well. He was 4 of 19 against his former team. If I was the coach, I would have questioned James Harden. James, you struggled all night. I understand there's an emotional attachment to this game, playing against the Rockets, but they couldn't stop Embiid. 39 points. Why didn't you give him the rock down the stretch? When questioned in the film session, Harden demurred. It's a word I've never heard of, saying he just couldn't get the ball to Embiid. These flare-ups between Harden and Rivers continued throughout the season. On February 27th, Philadelphia lost 101-99 at home to the Heat, the team that had knocked out the Sixers out of the playoffs a year ago. On the surface, there was nothing all that remarkable about the loss, except that it was the second in a row to a team they would likely have to go through in the playoffs. 2 nights earlier, Philadelphia dropped a 110-107 game to their other playoff nemesis, the Boston Celtics. I believe that was the night when Jason Tatum hit that game winner. For a team with championship aspirations, it was a good moment to refocus, especially with the next game being a rematch in Miami 2 days later. But get this, this is also peak James Harden. Harden did not travel with the team to Miami, sources said. He traveled separately with permission from the front office to enjoy the nightlife. This is not uncommon in the NBA or for Harden, but it did not sit well with Rivers and several players on the team. Days later, Rivers brought it up in the team meeting, specifically mentioning several of the players who expressed concerns about James Harden's actions. The whole episode was, quote, uncomfortable, one team source said. Even if they agreed with the substance of Rivers' message to Harden and the idea of holding him accountable, it was awkward for the players who were named. This is classic James Harden here, not taking accountability, getting frustrated, and not being a team player. And what kind of confuses me is that James Harden's teammates oftentimes have come to his defense, and they've defended him, advocating for him, the player that he is, but also the player that he is. But he continues to have these me-first kind of run-ins with coaches and organizations, and when he doesn't get his way, he decides to pout. And when you have a player who's a superstar, who doesn't take accountability, who doesn't travel with the team, would Kobe or MJ ever do that? No chance. It's hard to foster a winning environment when superstars get preferential treatment. And that's been a reason why the Philadelphia 76ers have had these playoff no-shows and these playoff flameouts, because they have an enabling culture. And that's why I continue to say I think it's best for the Philadelphia 76ers to move on, because I do not believe that you can win with a player like this. In that article, Ramona Shelburne also talked about Daryl Morey's relationship with James Harden and why Harden is in his feels about that. We've talked about that plenty on the show, but I wanted to pass along the information that we haven't yet discussed here in that bombshell article from Ramona. So make sure you subscribe to the show. Any questions about this, hit me up on social media at Chase_Senior. Keep it locked here for year-round Sixers coverage. Regular season's going to be here before we know it, and then we'll start to ramp up things here on the show.